Welcome to today's Energize Your Day, an event series that Equinor organizes in partnership with Euractiv, and where we wish to foster dialogue on topical trends and issues impacting Europe and the world. We believe in the power of an open and constructive dialogue to enhance understanding and promote long-term thinking, leading to collaborative solutions and actions. My name is Olav Omne Syversen, and I will moderate today's event on how EU-US relations can be reset in practice. To discuss the road ahead for this partnership, we have a great panel with us that I will introduce in a minute. But first, some house rules. If you who follow us online wish to engage with this great panel, you can use the hashtag of EU debates, and you can also engage on our chat function. The debate is recorded and will be available on Euractiv website in due course. Now, President Biden's European tour seems not to have been a strong bellwether for what lied ahead. Europe was taken by surprise by the rapid exit from Afghanistan and the announced Australia, UK, US cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Advancing the trade relationship has also not reached cruising speed, and this week's Trade and Technology Council come at a time where fences rather seem to have to be mended anew. To discuss what reset for EU-US relations, we will in order hear from Ruth Bachada, Head of Division United States and Canada at the European External Action Service, MEP Mia-Petra Kumpula-Natri, Vice Chair of the European Parliament's delegation with the United States and of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Age, as well as member of the Industry and Energy Committee of the European Parliament, MEP Anna Asimakoupoulou, Vice Chair of the Parliament's Committee on International Trade and member of the Committee on Development, as well as the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Age, and the European Parliament's delegation to relations with Israel. George Frampton, Distinguished Senior Fellow and Director of the Transatlantic Climate Policy Initiative at the Atlantic Council, and Giovanni Campi, Director Europe of the Transatlantic Business Council. Warm welcome to you all. To kick off today's debate, each of you will have about 3 minutes to share your perspectives on how to advance the EU-US partnership in the months and years to come. First to you, Mrs. Bachada, 100 days into the Biden administration and half-term into the von der Leyen Commission, where does the EU relations now stand and how can they be advanced? We look forward to your introductory statement.
Thanks a lot, Olai, and you're going to make my job a bit more difficult with the introduction that you did. But you started off in an interesting mode, highlighting the importance of dialogue, and I think especially in the recent events that you also mentioned, and in the difficult sort of the big questions that we still have or that we're working on resolving with the US, the major issue or the major change and the major shift that we have seen with this administration is precisely dialogue, and the fact that there are numbers to call, there are people to meet, and there are ways of how to discuss and to take things forward. This relationship is the biggest the EU has, be it historical ties, be it economic, be it security, be it foreign policy, trade, you name it, health now, post-pandemic. So it's a relationship that is extremely wide, and that of course hiccups will happen along the way, and we will not always be on the same page. This is clear, and it has become clear also in the first month. But certainly there is, I think, a lot of will from our side, from the side of the US, but also from the side of the member states to take this partnership forward, to strengthen it, and not only for the sake of our bilateral relationship, but also for the sake of the world, and the world that is watching us and watching this relationship grow. I think in terms of EU, we were very much prepared for the new administration. We had a joint communication that we could present the new administration, in fact, I think our thoughts and internal thinking was very much on the right wavelength, because when President Biden came to Europe on his first visit outside of Washington, and we had the EUUS summit, we could see that most of what the proposals of the EU that the EU made to the US and to the new administration are very much found in this joint statement that now we have to take forward and deliver. And I think we have the agenda, from the 15th of June, we have already had a lot of work. Already around the summit, we've had some trade discussions, and we have sort of found an agreement or a way forward on the large civil aircraft situation. And you've mentioned also the Trade and Technology Council with the first meeting taking place this Wednesday. We agreed also how to deal with the pandemic itself. You've seen also the statement or the joint statement between. That was launched by President von der Leyen last week. We have a lot of work on climate ongoing. There's a good excellent synergy, I would say, between EVP Timmermans and Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry. We've had already the second meeting of high-level climate action group. Of course, there a lot of work needs to be done, in particular on climate finance. We have, I mentioned also the work on COVID. The TTC in itself, it's a huge agenda going forward. A lot of work on investment screening, on the digital front, on secure supply chains, and and my area, or big area of, where we work on certainly on foreign policy. We've had the launch of the China dialogue, a number of dialogues that we've agreed on. We work very much on the ground, Western Balkans, on the Eastern Partnership. So there the agenda is really, really wide. Again, we've seen hiccups along the way, and we have a lot of difficult work ahead of us. Privacy shield, we've mentioned trade, not only the bilateral, but also WTO, for instance, and where we see WTO heading. So the agenda is wide, but I said I wouldn't just as yet say that the honeymoon is over, but or maybe beyond the honeymoon there's a long marriage that we both have to make this work together. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Happy to hear that the conclusion is that we are on or onwards to the honeymoon, Ruth. Mia Petra, US President John F. Kennedy once said that the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. In your role as the Vice Chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the US, and I know that you've been in recent contact with US homologs, can you sort of confirm that the sun is out on both sides of the Atlantic and we are ready to fix relations, or that we are already in the process of fixing them?
I think sun is still shining, and it was when this agreement to talk today, the very timely meeting was. Of course, then we already have some, if I quote, hiccups then for the relations, even to launch the Wednesday TTC. But for me, it's still time to show that we can deliver. If I listen to this previous speaker, a long exhaustive list that what we could do, the challenge is that now we should really deliver. And then I see the Wednesday as a concrete new start, as it also has not only the people who usually get in contact, but it has a political leadership, it has a political will from both sides to have this extensive list for topics for the TTC. But it's also that we come to the new time, and not only for the new Biden administration or European Commission with von der Leyen and willingness to create a more close contacts with transatlantic cooperation, but it is also that time is changing. The climate acute crisis is getting worse, and we see the science calling us to deliver quicker and more. And that's why it's very important that Biden is willing to do that. I was skeptical in the beginning that how much can he deliver, but I maybe have hopes to see that it turns to be partisan, more bipartisan, to see that some actions are needed for the climate efforts, which, by the way, at the same time modernize US infrastructure. So they can combine many good aims together. And then also the times are changing, that we see the digital is getting there on the agenda. It wasn't there when WTO was created, climate nor digital. So that also stresses a new kind of agenda in front of us that wasn't there before that strongly. It didn't happen overnight, but it wasn't that strong maybe 7 years ago, or when even the TTIP was negotiated. So I put a lot of hopes for the restart, that a new era is also for the new surrounding world to mention. So trade is an old on the agenda. It's not at all the easiest one and requires solutions, but then we have these new topics that could combine us with the pressure from outside that if we don't deliver, neither of us maybe will be the survivor or the champion for the AI or for the quantum or for other human-driven development for the digital society. And if I may conclude by mentioning also that democracies are challenged from inside, but also externally, and that can also get us together to take the values on board when we talk about the common targets that we have. I love the idea of having almost 20% of the global economy in the European legislative powers, so the parliament being the legislator. Combining on some fields, our efforts would be even 40%. So the Brussels effect could be transatlantic effect, and that motivates, I hope, us to work together.
Thank you, Mia-Petra, and thank you for stressing the urgency of fixing the transatlantic relations. Indeed, the list is long of what needs to be addressed, and climate absolutely one of them. We will revert to that issue. Anna Michelle, you're a strong supporter of the transatlantic relationship, and you follow EU-US trade discussions closely. Today, you have an op-ed out on the Trade and Technology Council on the website of Euractiv. This council will meet in Pittsburgh on Wednesday, and you argue in your op-ed that it is one of the strongest opportunities for a reset of the transatlantic relation. What are your expectations for the council discussions this week, and how it can help reset relations?
Thank you, Olav, and thank you very much to Euractiv and to Equinor for organizing this. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be discussing this important topic with such a distinguished panel. Yes, it's true, Olav. I've been very vocal about the fact that I am a big fan of the transatlantic relationship, and that's for three reasons. One, it's a relationship with historic depth. Secondly, it's a relationship which is based on a common set of values. And thirdly, it's a relationship that stems from mutual benefit, which I think also has a lot of future in it. So finally, it's a relationship that is particularly critical to our security and to our prosperity. And I think going forward in the digital age, it'll be even more critical for our security and, of course, for our the preservation of our democracy in and of itself. I was very pleased when the EU put out this communication saying we really, this is an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity for us to collaborate with the United States. I was very worried when we announced the CAI, because I thought that might create problems in the relationship. I was a little bit, I was very pleased with when the EUUS summit happened. I was very pleased that this was President Biden's first trip. I had probably higher expectations than I should have from this summit. A lot of longstanding issues, which I thought we could make more progress on, like the Boeing Airbus complete resolution of that, as opposed to just, moving forward, sweeping it under the rug for another 5 years, which is, as far as I'm concerned, what happened, or on the steel and aluminum tariffs. So I wasn't very pleased that a lot of these issues were not moving forward the way I thought they should off the bat. But I was very pleased to see that this Trade and Technology Council was announced, and I placed a lot of hope in it. So after what happened in Afghanistan, and after what happened, of course, with AUKUS, which, yes, clearly was an affront to one of our member states and a big deal, I was very worried that this Trade and Technology Council was going to be postponed, maybe even indefinitely. So hence the op-ed, which I thank you again for hosting. But I'm now happy that this is going ahead. I have much more limited expectations than I did in the past, not just because we've had these bumps on the road, but because I think that it's clear that we're in a different world. And I think that in Europe right now, the way things are with the German elections and the French elections coming up and the French presidency and all this discussion about strategic autonomy, our relationship as European Union with China, which is a lot more balanced, let's say, than the stance that the United States is taking at the moment. Let's say I have reasonably limited expectations, but, and I'll say this in closing, I really do think the Trade and Technology Council is, at the moment, a good opportunity to de-escalate some of the tension that gave rise to, brought forth these rather powerful statements on both sides. And then generally, I think it's a forum where we can continue to diffuse whatever political differences are going to be happening, and a good place where we can actually make some progress, some real progress on issues, whether they are semiconductors to start with, or the fact that we all agree that a risks-based approach to AI is the way to go, and creating trust. Whatever we do is in the right direction. Whatever we can resolve is a good thing at the moment. So I'm looking forward to the results from the Trade and Technology Council, but mostly I'm looking forward to seeing it become a forum where we can really come together on things that are important for the future of democracy. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And for sure, the list of the topics that the Trade and Technology Council has been tasked to deal with, they are very much at the forefront of what the EU and the US need to deal with in a world as complicated as the one we live in today. Now, George, in July this year, you published an article, Fit for 55, Reshaping Global Climate Leadership and the Transatlantic Cooperation. We are soon heading into COP26. Special Envoy John Kerry just gave us a peek of the US Sustainable Development Goals 7 Energy Compact of the US. Is climate leadership a new field of cooperation or competition between the EU and the US, in your view?
Well, thank you to Equinor and Euractiv for including me in this conversation. that's an issue that was raised in the invitation to this conversation. And I would say that the real need, the overwhelming need here, to echo those who've already spoken, is for cooperation in leadership on climate, joint leadership, because it's really going to take the U.S. and Europe working together to. This is going to be essential to the success of global ambition on climate. Only the U.S. and the EU can build a critical mass of the willing, bring in, working very closely together, going to have to work closely together with the UK and Canada, but also to bring in Japan, Korea, South Africa, other OECD countries, to begin with, just to have this critical mass to address the huge economic transformation that's going to be required, and to work with China, India, and lesser developed countries where that's going to have to happen. Let me cite three key areas here that are going to be very challenging for cooperation. One is that the intersection of trade and climate policy is something not very well understood by most policymakers in the United States, but it certainly poses significant problems to robust EU-US cooperation. I don't think the biggest challenge here is the competing border carbon adjustments, although the EU BCAM is obviously the current hot item, because there's a common concern within the EU and the US to prevent carbon leakage, to protect domestic industry's competitiveness. So there certainly ought to be ways to harmonize, to work out together the concerns about leakage. And I'm happy to talk about that some more. I think the real challenge here in the trade climate nexus is that on both sides of the Atlantic, we're going to be mounting enormous public investment and stimulus programs in decarbonization, which requires carbon decarbonization subsidies, tax credits, public investment, public procurement policies. Normally, many of these policies, which will be carbon limited, are going to lead to objections under current WTO trade rules. And yet both sides will be doing these things in aid of a mutual essential public good, which is economic recovery and decarbonization. So I think it's the relationship between existing WTO trade policy and those stimulus programs on both sides of the Atlantic where we're going to have to focus our attention. Second, I think there's a real opportunity in developing global cooperation on industrial decarbonization. Here in some areas, the industry, steel, cement, even the fertilizer industry is a little bit ahead of government, but government policies and transatlantic cooperation are going to be essential to structure the right policy choices to produce the massive investment necessary. And the third, obviously, is finance, public finance, of course, but figuring out how to stimulate the private finance in the BRICS and lesser developed countries. This is ultimately probably the biggest ticket item of all. It'll be the biggest challenge, and it's one where the US and the EU have to begin as partners if we're going to make global progress. So I think focus on industrial decarbonization, trade, and finance are probably the three areas where close transatlantic cooperation and leadership is going to be essential.
Thanks for that, George. And the last panelist with us today, Giovanni, you represent the voice of the business on the panel, and you've actively worked on promoting transatlantic economic integration through the business association TABC. What role do you see for business in helping reset EU-US relations going forward?
Thank you very much, Olaf. Thank you for the invitation to the panel. I'm very honored to be here representing the TABC. Now, listen, it's been said earlier, I think, by some of the speakers, the deal from an industry perspective, the TTC is the deal right now. And I think, that really promises, I think, to relaunch, if you like, a positive economic integration agenda between the EU and the US that we haven't had for quite some time. So, I mean, I can echo some of the previous speakers saying we're extremely pleased that the TTC inaugural meeting is taking place later this week in Pittsburgh. And I think the industry really looks at that with very, very high expectations, in fact, but also with a degree of realism, I think. Very important for the TTC probably to start with kind of confidence building and momentum building initiatives to build a degree of trust and confidence. And probably one of the most difficult things there is going to be for the two sides to agree, I think, from the outset on a series of definitions and approaches and whatever on issues, on specific issues like, what does a human-centric approach to AI means? What does security mean? Tech accessibility, non-discrimination. So a series of concepts that the two sides need to discuss and agree on, and that, all the rest probably will come from there. Ultimately, the TTC, will be about agreeing on standards, common approaches, and so on and so forth. But, a discussion and a common understanding on principles and definitions at the beginning probably will be key. Now, to answer your question, we think it will be key for the industry to be very closely, obviously, associated to the TTC work, because obviously of what the industry can bring, I think, to the table and to the discussion. So we very much hope, there are high expectations that the meeting later this week, there will be some sort of announcement there as well in terms of how industry can, promote the transatlantic economic relationship, but input effectively and continuously and regularly on the TTC work going forward. That we think is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. And I'll just want to remind the listeners that you can also post your questions in the chat function of the Vimeo tool. But I want to get back to our debate a bit, and to you, Ruth. You've heard several of the other panelists stressing the importance of the TTC, including also that there needs to be possibilities for business, but also I think there is a discussion about how representatives of the European Parliament can be interacting with the TTC. How do you see that being decided? Will it be decided this Wednesday, or will it take a long time before we know how the TTC will actually work in practice?
So I think how the TTC works in practice is more or less, in terms of setup, we more or less know. So there is a structure of 10 working groups dealing with different work strands that I think most of the speakers have mentioned. Technology standards, climate and clean tech, secure supply chains, information communication technology, data governance, misuse of technology. Here also related to human rights and democracy as one of the key subjects raised also by a previous speaker. I think it builds on the work that was already ongoing with the US for a long time on export controls, on investment screening, and then there's also also the side of promoting small and medium-sized enterprises and their access to the use of digital tools, and also a final working group on global trade challenges, and that includes a wider discussion also on the challenges from non-market economies. So the work strands are set up, and there are different working groups that are already have already started and are already looking forward at an agenda how to take the work forward. There are different DGs from the Commission and also the EAS participating alongside or on the US side with State Department, Department of Commerce, and USTR from Trade, and also the National Security Council, the NSC led by the White House, of course. So there's there's different working groups that are working on these on these working groups. Again, one has to understand that, of course, the summit was mid-June, and the work is really in its initial phases. There are some areas that are more advanced, that there's more clarity, let's say, of where we're going, and some that will be after Wednesday would need also to be solidified. But a working program, let's say, is already in motion. There's also, of course, important three things that I think also my Commission colleagues are looking at. One is the involvement of civil society, basically exchanging with civil society what's being discussed, what's the setup, and how to make sure that their ideas are also taken into consideration in the work going forward. And then there is obviously engagement with the European Parliament, and I think there we will see also once we hear from the Parliament side how on what setup to take this forward. I think there's certainly a lot of readiness for engagement also from the Commission colleagues. And beyond that, I think the foreign policy aspect of I think one of the speakers, if I remember well, George mentioned that this will be about standards and setting standards, and of course this will be all the more important of how to engage other third countries, like-minded third countries that agree with the EU and US, or have the same, let's say, world vision or global vision, and how to work with these countries to take the work that will be set out this Wednesday in Pittsburgh, and also going forward, because of course this is just the first meeting, and it's laying the ground of a huge agenda ultimately.
Thank you, and Ruth, and Petra, you have of course also views on how the European Parliament can engage towards, or should be engaged in these talks. But if you look at the great number, or the large number of work streams or task forces set up, which one under this Trade and Technology Council, which one do you believe have the most reasonable rate of success ahead of it in terms of advancing substantially in the months ahead?
Would you see the risk that if I mention some, so the others may be lazy then? So that actually it is very comprehensive, but it is very up to the date. So say that the challenges that we do see. Also, when we had some contacts to White House in the spring, when USA was still considering the answer before the Biden visit on the proposal by the Commission and European side. So this is the start from our side to ask for TTC to happen. It was a little bit skeptical with some people that, you have quite many dialogues going on. So now what should we do is to find another way because we have too often a dialogue set up without very concrete results. So some people see that now when there is a political leadership from both sides following and coming to the Pittsburgh face-to-face, meets each other, gives more possibilities to also find something. For me, I'm quite straightforward in my speaking, so I think one phenomena that carries us forward is that there is an urgency to do something. And this is also, if we very openly and frankly look at this, we see USA doing agreements with other parts of the world on semiconductors, on trade, on some military equipment trade deals, and so on. So if we don't do it, if we only start dialogues all the time, we will not reach what we want from the European side. So of course we also do our Asia Pacific strategy coming up. I'm personally working on the e-commerce as a standing rapporteur in the parliament if there would be agreement in the TSI in the WTO framework. And if not, I don't know how much appetite is left after we see many deals on e-commerce or digital data transfers bilaterally or regionally. So that's why I think there is really now something that we need to rethink how to do it. So I would not pick up any single one. My favorite are of course the clean tech, but it was very great speech we heard from the Atlantic Council, which I fully agree. We need the systemic change, so we need to use the best technology available and not to make the trade barriers to not that transit to happen. And then also on AI, maybe my duty as working for IDA committee also, and there were already some leaked papers which we could very easily recognize, resample the legislative proposal we are already working in. But for me, this is to really the way to find each other on the global challenges that we do face. And let me conclude on the parliament. It again resembles the reality we live in. The trade people, they do have good contacts. I'm also in the committee with Anna on the Intercommittee, the Trade Committee, and we have had hearings of the Commission representative from the DG Trade. So we do have our scrutiny for the Commission, what they are preparing and doing. But there are so many other committees who do not have these international links and structures to do. And this is the challenge also inside the Parliament, inside the Congress, but also I think in the whole structures, that if we only look this from the lenses of the foreign service, or if we look this through the lenses of trade, we won't do what is needed for the climate, what is needed for the tech cooperation, and what is needed for the human-centric trustworthy AI, for example. So that's why we should really think the structures, how to involve the new people on the transatlantic relations.
Thank you, Mia Petra. And I hear Europe needs to do more deals and not only dialogue or facilitating dialogue. Anna, when we look at the joint EU-US COVID manufacturing and supply chain task force, we look at EU-US high-level climate action group, and we now get the TTC. Do you support what Mia Petra says, that we are not in lack of platforms for dialogue, but so far none of these have really made a huge difference to progressing the EU-US relationship?
Yeah, well, like I said, Olav, I mean, I'm just as impatient as the next person who's in favor of making progress, and I'm just, I'm in favor of action speak louder than words. But these are not simple issues, and so yes, so I agree with what Mia Petra says, and I think that these can only enhance dialogue, and I just want to add to that this shouldn't be viewed as a competitive process. It should be viewed as a process of synthesis and coming together. And I know that this feeds into this discussion that's going on now about what our strategic autonomy is, and and if this is a good thing for the relationship or a bad thing for the relationship. And I just, if I can just add my 2 cents here of the way I look at this. When we have this discussion about strategic autonomy and people are saying if they're in favor of it or against, you really wonder what they mean. Does it mean, I don't know, an army? Does it mean defense capacity? Does it mean digital sovereignty? What does it mean exactly? Well, I take the Greek perspective to this issue as a Greek MEP, and I look at the etymology of the word. And autonomy is a Greek word. It's from the word autonomia, and it literally means it's from the 2 words aftos, which means self, and nomos, which means law. So it literally what it means is the ability to, or the right you have to make your own rules. And this is something we know a lot about in the EU. It causes the Brussels effect, which Mia Petra also mentioned previously. So for me, this forum in the TTC and talking will lead to an understanding of each other's rules, and through what's our common set of values and our common interests will lead us to create new rules and to agree on new rules. And that is that will be an autonomy that I think can inspire like-minded partners. And even if you take our combined size, sort of force them in this new effect, which is beyond the Brussels effect. It could be the Brussels and US effect. And I'll close by saying that, as a lawyer, we have this concept of, when we talk about liability, many times we talk about joint and several liabilities. So you hold people accountable in the same way, equally, on their own and jointly. And I think that that's how we should look at strategic autonomy. This is something that we want to have on our own, but we also want to have with our most important and valued partner, which is the United States. So, the basic answer is yes, dialogue is a good thing, and it will lead to rules, and it will lead to action eventually, and we certainly should not stop.
A follow-up question on the strategic autonomy, and in your op-ed, Anna, you referred to China being the elephant in the room. So, to what extent can the TTC serve in addressing that particular big elephant?
Well, look, I think not mentioning China expressly is a compromise, and it's fine. Compromises are an important aspect of reaching common ground. And in any case, I think as champions of multilateral world order, what we want is rules that lead to a level playing field, that make sure things are fair and that everybody plays by. So whether you mention China or not, everybody knows that China is not doing well adhering to these rules. And so if you want to just mention what they're doing as opposed to mention their name, that's fine with me. But I think that the United States will be very forceful, it's clear, of making China a focal point. And I think that the European Union is going to have a different, more balanced and more nuanced, let's say, approach to this. But we can see eye to eye when it comes to practices that are simply unacceptable, regardless, by the way, of who is engaging in them. So, whether we talk about the elephant in the room or we don't talk about the elephant in the room, the elephant is there. But we have to deal with the rules that the elephant has to live by. So that's the important part, and that's why this council can make some headway that goes beyond what we can do individually.
Thank you. I would like to revert to one of your points, George, on trade. It's difficult to see that we will be able to solve intricate problems such as climate without having trade policies that works in the direction of solving it. I.e., we need trade in tech that helps us all solve emission issues. We need to price in so that polluter pays all across the world. How do you see the EU and the US cooperate in order to take forward WTO, the necessary WTO reforms, or is that not in the way to deal with an issue such as climate?
Well, I agree with you 100% that we're not going to make the kind of global progress on climate that we need without trade policies that support rather than impede or create friction among countries that must be working together and cooperating, and that this is going to require some real reevaluation of some of the current WTO trade rules, whether climate-friendly trade policy can wait for overall WTO reform, it seems to me remains uncertain. I think the importance of the Trade and Technology Council is that following the summit, EUUS summit, it was set up and moving forward in a very aggressive way. And that's a really good sign for cooperation. But I'm not sure that this is going to be the venue where US-EU trade issues are most intensely examined or negotiated. Right now, of course, the Kerry team at the State Department doesn't want to deal with trade issues at all until after the COP in Glasgow, because the US focus is entirely on raising everyone's ambition going into Glasgow, and trade issues are sort of an impediment to that right now, a side issue. But what the venue is going to be for serious discussion of trade issues is not clear. It could be the Trade and Technology Council. It could be this trade and environment sustainability dialogue set up a year ago by about 50 countries under the WTO rubric, which had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. It could be the WTO, it could be the COP, it could be the WTO ministerial, it could be some other bilateral or plurilateral discussions between a few countries. Secretary Janet Yellen suggested that this be taken up by the G20. That didn't fly very far. There are people who think this should be a subject of the G7 meeting upcoming. So I think there are still some clarity about what venue or venues are going to be the best. But I do think that this is something that needs to be addressed soon. And an example of the border carbon adjustment issues, BCAM issues, just a couple of observations about why I think that is not going to be, in the end, the hardest problem and can be resolved. Executive Vice President Timmermans was in the US last week. We did a discussion with him at the Atlantic Council, a public one, and put him together with some journalists. He said publicly and privately, we don't really want to impose a BCAM. We just want other countries to raise their ambition. And in fact, of all of the products, the sectors that the BCAM would cover, at least according to the initial proposal, the only one where there's significant trade from imports from the United States is steel. And the current BCAM would give US steel a huge competitive advantage. So the BCAM as proposed by the EU right now is very advantageous to the United States. In the United States, I think there's generally no understanding at all of what this is all about. And so there have been proposals in the Congress for border adjustment or border import tax, carbon tax that people completely don't understand is premised on having a price in the US, which we apparently are not going to have. And the way it's proposed has no chance of meeting WTO rules ever. So all of this can easily be harmonized. I think it's the bigger issues about subsidies and public purchase and public investment that are going to have to be addressed. And it's not clear to me what the best venue is going to be. Maybe more than one. It may be the Trade and Technology Council, or it may not.
Thanks, George. We have a question from the audience, from Andreas Aktourianikis, who is lead policy analyst at the European Policy Center. And he has a query about whether we, instead of pitting the EU-US TTC against China, what would be a more constructive way to address the issue of China? Perhaps that one needs to go to you, Ruth.
Thanks a lot, Ole, for this. In fact, I think it is very, very clear, also from colleagues from my Commission colleagues, that the TTC is not an anti-China platform. Of course, many of the challenges discussed are came to the fore and are there because of China. But within the TTC, there is an opportunity to discuss. It will not, as George said, it will not be the place where trade negotiations will be taking place, or the resolving the trade issues. But beyond the aircraft Boeing, beyond the 232 or WTO, there are also a number of other challenges related to trade that certainly will be discussed in the TTC, and as I said, it will be also about setting standards globally and how to engage with other partners. As you may recall, also from the summit. But even before, once the administration set up shop, there was a decision to have a high-level dialogue on China and China-related challenges. We do have a different approach towards China from the US, though. We've seen also the US in joint statements also using our sort of way of seeing the relations with China. We have set up a dialogue with the US, and there we discuss a number of issues aside from also, of course, the economic and, let's say, global issues. We also discuss, for instance, human rights issues or the role of China in multilateral organizations, security, and now also, of course, with the Indo-Pacific strategy, the EU having an Indo-Pacific strategy that we've just launched. There will be also a number of regional issues that we could discuss. Maybe also here I wanted to make brackets that we're still awaiting for the administration to come to the fore with their own assessment of China and their policy. So we've seen sort of fragmented in different speeches or in different ways, but we're still awaiting for the US to come to the fore with their strategy and let us know what they intend to do, for instance, with phase one. So. What sort of relationship they want with or they're looking for with China. So this will be very interesting also to discuss with the US once we have a clearer also idea of their vision. And maybe something that was not mentioned by colleagues or by myself earlier is the fact that that we have this window of opportunity to work with the US ahead of the midterm elections, and this will be also a big point or turning point to see where these elections are going. But of course, in the meantime, we've seen already that Biden takes a lot of his foreign policy decisions, and also China related, or also like tariffs relating, like the 232, because of internal US politics. So also where the midterm elections will go will be quite important in our relationship going forward.
Thank you, Ruth. I just want to bring you back in the conversation, Giovanni, and perhaps reflect a bit around what the expectations of business are when it comes to supply chains. They have been strained during the pandemic for obvious reasons, but when we are slowly returning to opening up our societies, we see that there are discussions both on the US side and here in Europe about how to make sure that we have secure supply chains going forward. It relates to what Anna brought up as strategic autonomy, obviously. And we see that Biden has discussed this in terms of being independent or more independent with regard to China. How do you see the European business community is now working to revisit their supply chains across the globe, be it transatlantic or be it towards Asia?
Thank you, Olaf. Now, the supply chains is obviously one of the key issues, I think, and on which we expect discussions, as has been said before, but also some decisions, a step forward, and possibly a work plan at the forthcoming TTC. I mean, there is obviously the issue of specifically the issue of semiconductors, which on which probably there will be quite a bit of maybe not easy discussions as well, I think, going forward. Supply chains is definitely key, and I mean, European industry and obviously speak for transatlantic industry at large, but we've seen European industry in a number of sectors over the past years and months already adapting supply chains, in a variety of areas. So I think the TTC discussions on this come at a moment where industry has already started to adapt, if you like, or trying to adapt. But we do see a variety of sectors where things are very complicated, let's say. So I think that definitely a joint transatlantic understanding and agreement on some step forwards on supply chains would be definitely very, very, very much welcome. Now, I would say, as has been mentioned earlier by other speakers, supply chains, and it's certainly one of the I would say 3, 4, or 5 areas on where we expect some outcomes and deliverables later this week. So fingers crossed there.
Thank you, Giovanni. I'm mindful of time, but I'm also keen to hear Mia-Petra and Anna on the role of member states. Mia-Petra, Finland has just organized or helped organize the meeting between the top brass in the US and military a big military meeting. Then we have several academic in Greece who has argued for roads to transatlantic relations actually going through Athens, because there is the Eastern Mediterranean region that needs attention from both sides. How do you see actually member states and the Union contributing to making a success out of the transatlantic relationship? Perhaps starts with you, Mia-Petra.
Yes, Finland is always a bridge builder if possible, and then having now the interest on the Arctic strategy also soon out from the Commission, it was an important meeting, of course, that we could bring a fora for the US and Russia high military people to meet. But then regarding the TTC and member states, of course, TTC doesn't have a mandate to agree on something that is on the power of the parliament, neither the MS, the member states. So at this phase, it's the agenda, it's a dialogue, it's a council. But then if we do, or the negotiators do their work well, of course, we hope that there will be some ideas for the further agreement, and at least then the really good involvement of the member states for the mandate and then for the parliament as well is needed. So at this phase, it's the scrutiny to follow the important issues happening there. But also, I see that the main goal is that we are active and then want to build the global rules together and with the power of 2 continents instead of 1, and we still see so many likes that we target the same goal. So I do see that sometimes in United States they do see the countries more than EU, which I think is under the development, so that also they are learning slowly that Parliament is actually a legislator when it comes to the new tech, for example, so platforms, AI, you name it. So that's why I also am favoring the dialogue in between the parliaments, and at least on July, our visit of the US delegation together with the Congress, we have a line on our one-pager that we will follow TTC and hope to provide some support for that.
Great. Anna, does the road to rebuilding the transatlantic alliance run through Athens, as your compatriots George Pagouloutos and Katerina Soukou wrote in an Atlantic Council piece?
Well, I think that, I'd like to say yes, but I certainly think Greece can play a very important role. I mean, it's quite clear that the United States has shifted its focus, and that I'm not saying its entire focus, but clearly a big amount of it will be in the Indo-Pacific region. So, there is a void in our neighborhood here, and I think that we don't. A void is always dangerous because you don't know who's going to fill it. And I think that Europe really needs to play an important role there, and that goes back to our discussion on strategic autonomy. But in essence, it's very important to have stability, and it's very important to have peace altogether. So Greece has an excellent is a member of the European Union. Greece has an excellent relationship with the United States. Greece has an excellent relationship. Now has developed an excellent relationship with all of its neighbors in the Eastern Mediterranean, with Israel, with Egypt. Greece has been very active diplomatically in putting to rest open issues based on international law. And, Greece, I think, it's sort of a no-brainer that it would be a very good focal point for policy in the region that would safeguard peace and stability. Now, and I think that the European Union has to also be a lot more assertive when it comes to filling this void and dealing with proxy wars, dealing with Turkey and its aggressive behavior and its breaches of international law. So I think that Greece is going to de facto play a much bigger role in the future than it has in the past with the government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, whose diplomacy and diplomatic efforts have been so just really active in the past 2 years.
Thank you, Anna. And Ruth, last question to you. Financial Times said, I think last week, the EU-US relations and the TTC and the progress under the TTC is going to be slow, unspectacular, and subject to diplomatic spats. Do you agree to Financial Times assessment, or can we be a bit more positive based on the discussions we've had today?
I'm a diplomat, so I have to be positive. It's my job. So, as I said, this relationship is, certainly the TTC is really one of the biggest outcomes of the summit, and really of the work there will be of huge importance. We've seen, as we see the interest from the private sector, companies, on the US side, civil society, it is really the core of the work. What kind of internet do we want? What kind of standards do we? It really is the basis this for good work. You know, there is a lot of excitement, of course, because it is a huge thing, but ultimately it will be about, you know, step by step working together and, you know, forging, you know, outcomes going forward, you know, with discussing with the member states that, you know, in some parts of these working groups, they have to implement or very much work, and with the MEPs, as you know, as many have mentioned, the cross work that is going on EU legislation. You know, I would not be so negative. At the same time, I think, you know, what happened last week also makes us realize that we have to go forward. We have to have our strategies for the Indo-Pacific. We have to, you know, we have to set our standards, and you know, we showed this to the world already during the previous administration that we will keep on working. And I think this was a good message. But at the same time, we have very strong and good partners in Washington at the moment. Yes, there are hiccups, and but certainly there are, you know, there's a really good partnership and a really good we have good partners across the Atlantic. So I think now is the time to use this, and you know, we should not, you know, now it's really urgent, and when it comes now to standard setting, we really need to get it right this time. So I wouldn't be so pessimistic. I would let the working groups do a bit of their work, and then in maybe in 6 months or a year's time, we can have another discussion.
Very good. I would be pleased to have that discussion in 6 months' time, given the urgency that all of the panelists are actually seeing or wanting to see in the relations between the EU and the US. I've heard today that there is a solid relationship between the EU and the US. Yes, there has been bump, but the base is very solid. 2, there is now the time for urgent dialogue. This is actually taking place. There's a number of platforms where this will take place, and there's a new energy behind many of these platforms. This energy stems from an urgency seen both from the US and the EU to deal with some global issues of importance to both parties. And then on a positive note, also on the basis of the many people we've seen in the streets across the globe, climate looks to be one of the issues where the EU and the US will need to advance the most together and jointly take leadership and stewardship of talks coming up to COP26. On that, thanks to all of you for taking part in this debate today, and also thanks to all of you who have followed the debate. Again, this will be available on the net after we have closed, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.